Hi Dana, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
So we are here today with Dana Garrison. He is the founder of ISLS, the International Spanish Language Studies Academy School
Pretty close.
program. I killed it.
Let's just go with that. I don't think it's too late for me to change the name.
So, where did this all start? So, about 2.5 years ago, my wife and I decided to bring our kids to Costa Rica, and we were looking for a program for the children. We have twin girls that are now 12, but then we're like 9 or 10 or something like that. And Dana's Academy came up, and so I called him. We set things up, flew down. He has an incredible language academy here. At the time, there was chock full of children. They come down for the summer and have a blast. And we did Spanish language for the kids. They did surfing. They did horseback riding, zip lining. They had so many programs for the adults as well. We went around town. I remember that with the other adults. It was a wonderful time, and so it was our second time back here in the premises in the area. Dana also does rentals on the third floor of the building, which is where we're at right now. So if you guys are interested, let us know. But I wanted to interview Dana and get his take on his life. It's very interesting. He did this. There's very few programs like this, especially for children. I think a lot of the programs for Spanish learning tend to be focused only on adults, but he had managed to do something that incorporated not only adults but children as well. And so he's gracious enough to sit here with us and chat a little bit about it. So, tons of questions. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, first of all, who you are and a little bit about how you started, why you started.
Well, as with most things, it's complicated. I'm originally from Los Angeles, and actually that's where I live now with my family. It all started about a little over 30 years ago when my older brother graduated from college. He wanted to come to Costa Rica specifically to learn Spanish. And I kind of came along as a tag along just to kind of have fun and come to a country that I'd never been to before. And so we got down here. I had been having a little bit of health issues and had actually left my job up in the States just prior to coming down, and this was kind of going to be a de-stressor. I worked at a law firm, and I thought I needed some stress relief. But just prior to coming down, I did some final checkups with my physician, and I told him what I was doing. He thought I was crazy, and he said, "Well, if anything comes up, I'll call you." I'm like, I'm not really sure how Costa Rica works, but this is well before cell phones.
That's
well
right.
Before all of that stuff really became common. And so it was 1991, and so we hopped on a flight and came down here. It was a very rainy time because we came in May, at the end of May, early June. And so we got down here, and he had been good friends with a girl at school who was from Costa Rica. And so there was a man waiting at the airport who neither of us knew, had never met before. And he picked us up and took us to his house. He was her uncle. And got to know his family down here. And subsequently, over many years, became very, very close with them. His name was Ted Unti, and he has a story of his own. So we were here for about 3 days, just getting our feet wet. And I was staying at the house, and the phone started ringing, and it just rang and rang and rang. But there was nobody there, and I had never taken a Spanish class in my life. And I'm in somebody's house that I never knew. So I didn't really feel comfortable answering the phone. And this was back before they cut off the ring after a certain period of time, so it just kept ringing. So for about 45 minutes I sat in this house, and I was the only one there, and the phone rang for 45 minutes straight. And this feeling came over me of dread, just dread.
Right.
Door opens, Ted walks in, phone's ringing, he picks it up, I hear him I'm like 2 rooms away. I hear him say, "Yeah, I think he's here, hold on 1 second." And so they went and got me, and it was actually my mother back in California. And she was saying that I had to come back for some more tests. And I said, okay, well, what's going on? Well, they don't know, blah, 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 blah. And then my brother, another brother, because there's 7 of us in my family, got on the phone and I said, okay, do I have cancer? And he said, yes, you do. And he said, you have surgery scheduled for Monday. You have to fly home tonight.
Wow.
So I hopped on a plane the next morning and got there, went almost straight to the hospital. I had testicular cancer, and they were very afraid that it had metastasized. So they went in and, I did the operation, removed the tumor. And so what this did, and this is why this is a part of this story, you may want to cut it out at some
No,
point.
this is great.
Was I had planned, I had quit my job and I had planned to go back east to Boston University to go back to school. And I figured I wanted to become a writer, and that's really what I wanted to do. So I got accepted, I had a place to stay, I had a law firm to work for, and so all of that got put on hold because I had quit my job, which means I didn't have insurance. So luckily, California had COBRA at the time, still does, and I was able to get my insurance within 30 days. I was able to get my insurance back and go through everything, because it would have been a nightmare without it. But what it did was I had to stay in the state to keep my COBRA so that I could keep doing the treatments and everything. So I couldn't go to school. Now my brother had stayed down here. He ended up falling, a very short story, fell in love with a Costa Rican girl, took language classes, found this really cool school, became friends with the owner, and then he came back 3 months later and I saw him and he walked up and he said, short story, I've fallen in love, and longer story, I want to start a business and I want you to be my partner. And I said, okay, because I really had nothing going on.
Wow. What did your friends and parents say about the whole venture? I mean, this is a very big departure from where you were going.
I think everybody was just, including me, was just very happy I was still alive,
Yeah.
And so anything above and beyond that was reasonable.
I see.
That would have at a different time been unreasonable.
Do you think, looking back now, do you think that, how do you feel about that whole period of time? Do you feel like you lost an opportunity at Boston University as a writer? Do you feel like it was meant to be? How do you...
Well, certainly, I think we all have forks in the road. We can all look back on certain moments and really inflection points in our lives. And that certainly was a very large inflection point in my life, because there was a trunk going to the left that could have been something, and then there was this other trunk because of what had happened going to this direction. At the time, I not to sound morbid, but I really didn't know how long or how much time I had. And this other trunk just didn't seem like it was even going to be a possibility, at least for a while. I couldn't see myself going back east until all of this was settled out. And whereas this was kind of exciting, it was new, it was different, we didn't even know what we were going to do. That's the thing too. I think we were talking before we started that we threw a lot of spaghetti against the wall to try and find something that we could do. And one of those things was importing coffee and doing artisan stuff like that. So language school was always one possibility, because while he was down here and became friends with the owner of the school, the owner said, hey, why don't you go back to California? Colleges and stuff. And at the time, the business down here for language was almost exclusively, it was all adult, but it was almost exclusively college age adults. And so there were a handful of very popular and well-regarded schools, and they were all in San Jose.
Okay.
And so he said, well, I'll pay you a commission. You go up and send me students, and I'll pay you a commission. So that was always one part of what we were trying to do as well. And it just seemed like, every so often more spaghetti would fall off the wall, and at the very end of the day, the one that stuck and the one that seemed that we were good at was actually doing this recruiting for not just his school, because we were like, well, there are multiple schools, and not every school is right for the right person. So we started with 4 schools that we worked for and represented. Got very good at it, and then along the way bought a house in San Jose, because we figured that the students were getting taken care of outside of the school. The schools were very much focused on learning Spanish, and that was it. They had one lodging option, and that's with the host family. Not every student wants to stay with the host family, so we turned our house into a residence, and we started getting students that came down who didn't want to stay with the host family but wanted the kind of collegiate experience. And then that dovetailed into doing airport pickups and drop-offs, and then that became tours on the weekends, and I was a bus driver, busing around 10, 15 kids. Then we got a real bus driver, and then a real bus, and it just kept growing and growing, and the more and more we did this, the more opportunities seemed to appear. And then fast forward a couple of years, there was an opportunity presented to us to become partners in a language school that was starting up. It was going to be one of the first schools on the beach, and so we jumped on it. And it was the first time that we as marketers and people who had been on the ground here, not running the school, because I was not an educator. I'm an educator now because of just the process that's gone through. But I was not an educator, I was a marketer. And so I would talk to people all the time about what they wanted, and then I would give them what they got.
Right.
And there was a distance in between what they really wanted and what they were really what I was able to give them. So we felt like that having our own school and having the input to create programs that were different than just the program for a college student getting credit, or the program for a doctor coming down, who wants an intensive, private lesson. So there wasn't much in between those two.
Right.
So we were able to develop some really cool programs like surf and Spanish. We were the first surf and Spanish school. This was in this little tiny town on the beach down in the south that no one had ever heard of, called Playa Tamarindo. Famous for one reason, surfing. And that's what we did. And then we did adventure in Spanish. And then we developed a medical school, a medical program in Spanish. We were the first ones to do that as well. We partnered with the University of Texas and Dr. Harold Drayton, who was the guy who was in charge at that time, who trusted us enough to develop a program for his students. And that opened up a huge door. And then, as time went on, we opened up new campuses and different locations. And around that time, I had a 12, 13-year-old daughter who I didn't have any programs for. I had nothing for her Spanish was, because everything we did was for adults. So one year, my wife and I came up with the idea of a teen camp for her, essentially. Because if we can't develop it, why not? Or, why not do it? So we did, and it became almost successful overnight because there was a huge desire for this type of experience for kids, teenagers, and to be independent. In the beginning, we didn't even do day campers. It was all residential camp. These were, and we were not big enough and still aren't big enough to send representatives to these areas to fly them all down. So, parents have to put them on the plane and say goodbye, hope that they get to where they're supposed to go in the third world, in the middle of Central America, and then we pick them up.
Right. And
then they're with us for 1, 2, 3, 4. In the beginning, it was always 2-week camps. And then we would take them back. We would walk them to the plane, or as close to the plane as we could, and then we'd send them home. And that was the experience. That went on, it still goes on, as you know. We still have those programs. We still do them every summer. And then later on, we had another child. And as she was growing up, we were like, well, why should we wait until she's 13? Why don't we create a children's program? And so that started a whole different thing and put us on a different path to doing all of these children's programs and then camps. And then that's when we came to Playa Tamarindo. We had a school here at the time, and it's got to be about, she's 14. So I think the first year we did it was she was 1. And she didn't do the camp that year, obviously, but she was 1. So this will be our 15th year. And it just grew slowly at first, and then as the word got around, it started growing more, and then it just exploded. And I'll tell you, Tamarindo, like any other place in the world, once you figure out something that's a cool experience or a money-generating experience, it gets duplicated. And that is what happened with both the teen camps and the children's camps. So here in Tamarindo, there was no other camp. There was just no camp.
Right.
There was a camp for locals and out of Villa Real, but nothing for international kids. Now there's probably 36, and
Wow.
many of them worked with us and worked for us, or
Gotcha.
were my counselors or stuff.
Right.
But still, we trudge on, and still very popular.
Yeah.
Last summer, believe it or not, people wanted this kind of experience so badly that it was one of our best summers in a long time, and we had full teen camps, full children's camps, lots of adults that come down and take classes. But yeah, it's a fairly long story, but complete.
That's an incredible journey. You've seen Tamarindo change a lot, I assume.
Oh yeah.
You've been here, like, I want to say 12, 14 years or something like in Tamarindo?
So we opened the school in 2004. So, and then prior to this, we worked with the one and only other school in town that had been here for about probably 5 or 6 years prior. So we worked with them as an agent.
Nice.
So we sent them students. So working in Tamarindo, we started, I think, in 1999 here in Tamarindo. I had come prior to that just on vacation and just visiting different parts of the country, probably as early as 94 was, I think, the first time that I got here, just as a tourist, and it was very different. I mean, the thing about these beach towns, the more they change, the more they stay the same. I mean, the town itself, the vibe, the beach, the weather, so many aspects of it have not changed at all, while all these other things have changed drastically. I mean, there were no buildings on these hills, there was nothing up there, maybe one house that had been there for 30 years. The roads were completely dirt and gravel.
Wow.
There was no infrastructure, there was no sanitation, there was no water. All of that had to be built, and all of that is still being built, and it's still, being worked on and amplified and stuff. I have some issue with people who've been here a long time who say that, everything's changed for the worse. And I don't agree with that. I think certain change has not necessarily enhanced this place much. But other changes, like the fact that you can live here for 2 months. You can work. Your kids can be doing online school.
Right.
I can have a Wi-Fi and an internet speed that is capable of handling all of that with very little disruption. And here we are in front of the beach in the middle of Central America, so even that 5 years ago would have been difficult to really pull off because the fiber optic wasn't here yet. The infrastructure of the Wi-Fi and the mesh that we have here wasn't invented or widely used 5 years ago. The so that we could have different people on doing all this. Like we walked into the room and the kids have each their laptops and they're in their different classes and they're doing all this stuff next to each other while we're sitting in here and I'm checking my phone and so those capabilities have revolutionized this place. And then you take COVID and the almost right turn that we took with working from home and being able to work online and telecommute. People were doing that last year or 2 years ago, and it was coming, but nobody saw an extra couple 100 million people doing it in the United States overnight.
Right.
I didn't know what Zoom was before.
Exactly.
I had no idea.
Exactly.
Now I can't tell you the last day I wasn't on Zoom.
Right.
So it changes, but it also stays the same. I walk down for the sunset every night. And I see many of the same faces every night that I saw 5 years ago, that I saw 10 years ago, that I saw 20 years ago, maybe not so many, but 20 years ago. But, it's a right, and it's a thing that this whole town does. And so you can walk out on this beach right now, and maybe there's 100 or so people, maybe a little bit more that are on the beach in the water, whatever. Go down at sunset, and there's 1,000 people. Where do these people come from? Well, they have lives during the day. They work online. Exactly. So think about it this way. I mean, if I could come down here, and the trade-off is I have to work, I do my job, whatever that job is, I do it online, and then at about 4 or 5 o'clock, I log off. I walk down to the beach with my flip-flops or barefoot. I walk in the water, and I have a glass of rosé, whatever your particular beverage of choice is, and you sit there in a communal experience watching the sun go down. Yeah, it's not so bad.
Oh yeah, it's a dream. I gotta I got to piggyback on that. That has been one of the best experiences of my life, being able to be so close to the beach and see the natural beauty, which there's plenty of, and enjoy it anytime I want to. I mean, we're literally steps from the beach. I don't know if you can appreciate that in the background. Um, and I've not really had that experience before, being so close to such natural beauty. Know. So this is a very, very special experience, I would definitely say. Well, I'm not gonna hold you too much longer. I got a few, like maybe two more questions. I guess um, I'm just trying to take it all in, your whole process. I assume your kids are fluent at this point. Okay, so awesome. And as far as like using the Spanish language, are they using it? Are they here doing work? I mean, I'm guessing one of them is probably on her own at this point or old enough. Okay, so is she using the Spanish at all? And if so, how is she using it?
So it's a really interesting question it's an interesting question, and it's kind of funny how life has changed kind of around us when it comes to language, appreciation of a second language, necessity of a second language. All of this seems to, in the last 30 years, have literally done a 180-degree switch. So one of the things is our older daughter, we didn't really teach her Spanish until she started doing our camps at 12, 13. So she's now 32, she's a lawyer, and in between college and law school, she took 2 years off. And while she was taking 2 years off, she worked for an immigration law firm in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And she did mediation, worker mediation, company worker mediation. And she was the translator for the whole thing.
She definitely
so for 2
Spanish,
years,
right.
she sat in these meetings and in these conferences and in these negotiations and doing translation for them. So she went from 12, 13 years old, never having spoken Spanish, to being 22 years old and able to sit in conference rooms with people speaking different dialects of Spanish, because many of the workers were from Mexico, but some were from Guatemala and El Salvador and different places. So those are different accents and have different words, and being able to navigate all of that. Now, having said all of that, I would say that her command of the Spanish language is greatest with the written and read. So she is very biliterate. She's very biliterate. She can read and write, conjugate, everything extremely well at least, I think, a native speaker level or higher. Because she did, and another thing that this all worked out, don't have time to go into, but she did do a year abroad in Spain during college. But unlike the kids from her school who went to a language school while they were attending classes in English, she actually went to the University of Granada and she took all of her classes in Spanish.
Wow.
So she never took any more Spanish lessons. She just went and was a Spanish speaker taking classes in Granada. So very proud of her, on all sorts of levels. But now, for my younger daughter, we were like, okay, we're not going to make that mistake again. And the mistake that I speak of is we're not going to wait until she's 12.
Right.
Right. And by the time that because there's 18 years between the two, by the time the younger daughter came along, there were a lot of different options, not just us in what we did and what we've designed, but by all these other companies doing more for kids and families, online learning, Duolingo, all this stuff was starting to come around.
I see.
And so there were a lot more. And then on top of that, there's a huge kind of revolution going on in the United States that most people may not know about. And that is what's called the dual immersion school model.
Right.
And this is way more popular than most people realize. And we were lucky enough for her kindergarten year to get her into a school in Los Angeles that was just starting up, a Catholic parochial school in LA. And they had an ambitious agenda. They were going to open up a trilingual, tri-track school, and they did it. And we were hopefully some part of that maturation and coming along. So she's now in 8th grade. This is her 9th year in the school, and she has been doing Spanish, English, and of course before that she's been living down here in Spain. She comes down and she's a counselor for our children's camp.
Cool.
And the older daughter was one of our main counselors for the teen camp. She was a teen camper, and then when she became a college student, she became, one of the counselors. And then between college and law school, she became the head of our teen programs down here.
Wow.
She ran them and everything for us. So, they're obviously have been intimately involved in our experience and our kind of journey down here. So my youngest, her fluency level is and again, not just my opinion, but hopefully the schools, it is native. And her verbal ability, her bilingualism is unmatched. She has no accent.
Wow.
And she loves it. And we have had so many of her friends and their families come down and do our camps and visit Costa Rica over the years. And it's just become a community-wide event. And their kids are all learning Spanish. And there's other kids in our school learning Mandarin. They go to China and they go on experiences as well. So there's, just because I do marketing, when I first started with her at kindergarten, there were probably about 1,400 schools nationwide that I could find in the lists. And it was hard to find them because there weren't really a lot of associations at that time. Now, of course, there's a lot of dual immersion, bilingual education. And there's a difference between dual immersion and bilingual education. Okay. The main differentiating factor is that in dual immersion, what you're really trying to do is take 50% of the students who are native Spanish speakers or Mandarin speakers and marry them with 50% of the students who are English only. And then you put them together and you go 5, 6, 8, 9 years together. And at the end of that, the native Spanish speakers speak English fluently and the native English speakers speak Spanish fluently. And they both are on the same level. They can speak the language the same. They can do everything as if they were the other.
Right.
And so now there's well over probably 5,000 schools. And so in just in the course of about 8 years, it's quintupled. Every city in our area now, when we started, there were 2 cities that had Spanish immersion or dual immersion for Spanish. And now every single city has it. And at least one strand, one class that's doing both. So it's I guess an appreciation of different people and different modes of communication. I think it's also a nod towards these kids being 21st century citizens where, they can be working from Mexico but living in the United States, or they can be working for a company out of Spain but be living in Venezuela. I mean, they have so much more of the world as an open door to them, and I just think that's spectacular.
That's true. That's very true. Last question. It's a long one. It's linked. It ends basically, for parents like myself, my wife, and others who want their children to be bilingual. And in my particular case, I don't speak another language. I don't speak Spanish. My wife's not a native Spanish speaker. She's learning as we go. But basically, anybody who wants their children to end up being bilingual or trilingual or whatnot, multilingual, so the first part of the question is, what would be your suggestion on how to foster that? And the second part of the question is, tell me about sort of the school that you're doing now, what's coming up in the next 12 months, and how people can get in contact with you if they want to be a part of that.
Yeah. So the first part is kind of dovetailing off of what we were just talking about. There are so many more opportunities today for children to be exposed to a second language than there ever has been. Okay, I grew up in Los Angeles, where half the population speaks Spanish as a native language, and a good portion of the population also speaks many other languages, as from Mandarin to Thai to you name it, Japanese, all sorts of communities that have emigrated to Los Angeles. And so The biggest thing is that, think about a dual immersion school, especially if you've
Okay.
got a 2 or 3 year old, a 4 year old. They have kinders. This isn't just Los Angeles. Isn't just Texas or Florida. There are these programs all throughout the Midwest, in every state, in almost every part of every state. There are multiple of these. Second, there are a lot of good online opportunities. Now, of course, maybe people feel like they've had enough of online for the last year and a half to last in
Right.
their lives. But it cannot be denied that, one, we all know how to do it now. Two, there is a difference because we do this online. So our teachers here, they get on the computer, they connect from their home to someone else's home. And that child or adult, because we do all levels and ages, is looking and speaking to a native speaker in their own house, in their own country.
Right.
Sometimes they get up, they walk around, they show them the house, they
Right.
walk out on the street, they have their daughters come in, their neighbors sometimes come by. It's a much more interactive experience than I ever even imagined, because we've
That's
never
true.
done it before.
Right. That's true.
We never instituted it. It was only because of COVID that we instituted this whole thing, because we wanted our teachers to survive, and
Right.
we wanted the company to survive. And frankly,
Right.
nothing would have survived without those online lessons. And the really goodwill of our past clients to go, you know what, I'm not doing anything. I'd love to, have a class with Jose a couple times a week.
Right.
And then that couple times a week becomes once a week for 2 years. And then they come back down here, and then they have individual personal lessons with Jose here, sometimes in Jose's house, right where he was sitting.
Right.
So as we talked about before, the model has changed for us down here, and who knows what the future holds with all of that. But I would just say dual immersion, online lessons. There are a number of mothers and parent groups and father groups where people get together. I know that how we found out about the school starting that our youngest went to was at a play date with a bunch of other kids, and we were all talking about where the kids are going to go to school, and someone mentioned this new school that was starting up, and had that not happened, who knows what our
Right.
trajectory there would. She would have gone to a dual immersion school. She just wouldn't have gone to this one.
Right.
So I think that if you want it, it's out there. Plus, the world is interconnected. You guys just proved this over the last year, that if you want to, and you have the particular resources and situation that allow you to be in a foreign country with your children and still make money, still have your job, still make it work, and you can expose them to that, why not do it?
Right.
6 months, 1 year. Give them an experience that will affect them for the rest